Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Today we're going to talk about films that adapt popular books. Although both books and films have their own features, sometimes directors are forced to sacrifice logic in favor of spectacle. Here are a few examples where logic gets lost in favor of action, making it hard for viewers to believe what's happening. Number 1. No one will believe you anyway. In the magical world of Harry Potter, wizards go to great lengths to hide their existence from muggles. However, in the film adaptation of The Order of the Phoenix, the directors clearly decided to forget about this. In a scene where a group of wizards picks up Harry, they fly directly over London at low altitude, which is a complete violation of secrecy rules in the book. However, this was carefully thought out. A night sky, invisibility to muggles, and strict security measures. Yes, it looks spectacular. Flying over recognizable landmarks in London, but both spectacle and logic need balance. Of course, a film has to keep the audience's attention, but it would have been nice to at least explain why muggles don't notice these wizards. In the book, Hagrid was very concerned about security, but here it seems like muggles just became more tolerant of wizards flying right above their heads. Number 2. Wait, can they do that? I can't skip over the pointless scene of the burning of the burrow in the Half-Blood Prince. The house, which is often used as a meeting place for the Order of the Phoenix, turns out to be completely defenseless, and Death Eaters easily break in. After the fire, the burrow is perfectly fine in the next film, as if nothing ever happened. In the book, this scene didn't exist, and if it had, Voldemort would likely have burned the house down long ago. Number 3. Smile and wave. Dragons are among the most dangerous creatures in the Harry Potter world. But the scene in the Goblet of Fire where a dragon breaks out of its cage and carries Harry away is completely illogical. All the spectators, including professors and wizards, just sit there and wait for his return. But if the dragon escapes, that could become a huge problem for the Ministry of Magic. In the book, dragon control was much stricter, and such an incident would have been impossible, but in the film, the arena was just left with wooden bleachers and weak defenses. Number 4. Heartless. In the Deathly Hallows, we see Snape's memories where he arrives at the Potter's house and sees what happened to Lily. But the film makes us believe that Snape, after crying over Lily, abandoned Harry and left. This doesn't align with his character because despite his cruelty, Snape wasn't heartless. In the book, he definitely wouldn't have left Harry among the ruins. Number 5. Old new character. In the first 2 films, we see Professor Flitwick, but in The Prisoner of Azkaban, he disappears. Instead, a character played by the same actor, Warwick Davis, appears, but without a name. Later, the directors decide this is still Flitwick, only with a radically changed appearance and behavior. This plot twist, of course, raises questions, but no one explains what happened to his character. Number 6. Goodbye, loyalty. One of the most tragic moments in Harry Potter revolves around the bond of loyalty and the relationships between characters. These moments are often rooted in deep emotional stakes. Take, for instance, the scene in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows when Harry's own wand turns against him. In the film, this moment is framed as a sudden, dramatic twist of the wand decides to betray Harry. It feels like a mere plot device, a magical coincidence. But in the book, the connection between Harry's wand and Voldemort's is far more intricate. J.K. Rowling explains, the wand that had once belonged to Harry's enemy, the one that had been stolen from him, had the power to rebuke its owner in the moment of peril. This magical bond isn't just a dramatic turn. It's the result of deep magical laws and principles. The film reduces it to a visual spectacle, missing the important context that makes the moment meaningful. the movie sacrifices the logic behind this magical event in favor of a striking but hollow effect. Number 7. And where are the others? In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the disappearance of characters like Ginny Weasley is both sudden and puzzling. In the film, Ginny, a skilled witch, seems to forget her magical abilities when Harry needs her most. During critical moments, she's simply absent, with no explanation. This feels jarring, especially when considering the role she plays in the book. In the novel, Ginny is there for Harry, standing by him with strength and determination. J.K. Rowling writes, Ginny's eyes were full of understanding and she stepped forward, ready to help. She is a crucial part of the team, but the film neglects her active role. Her absence in the movie serves only to streamline the narrative, sacrificing the emotional depth of her character for the sake of a faster-paced spectacle. The book, however, shows the depth of these connections, where every character's actions are woven into the fabric of the story, making their presence matter. But in the film, these subtle yet important elements are often glossed over. Number 8. A battle without reason. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the battle at Hogwarts is intense, with spells flying in every direction and characters scrambling to survive. In the film, this chaotic fight is depicted as a pure spectacle, full of flashing lights and explosions. But in the book, the battle is driven by something deeper. The heroes aren't just fighting because it's expected, they're fighting for their freedom, for the future of the wizarding world, and for the safety of their loved ones. Harry isn't just swinging his wand at anything that moves, he's taking a stand. Rowling writes, they were fighting not for victory but for survival, for the chance to live in a world where their friends could be free. The emotional weight behind each spell, each action, is lost in the film's rush to create a visually stunning scene. The problem is that in the film, the battle feels like just another fight. The stakes, while clear, don't have the same emotional resonance. In the book, every character's actions are filled with purpose. Ron and Hermione are fighting not just to survive, but because they believe in a world where Voldemort's reign is over. When Harry faces off with Voldemort, it's not just a duel between two wizards. It's the culmination of everything Harry has fought for, every loss he has suffered. The book conveys the heavy cost of this battle, the weariness and the uncertainty. As Harry reflects, it wasn't the battle that mattered, but the outcome. In the film, this internal struggle fades, and all that remains is a fight to the finish, devoid of the emotional complexity that made the battle meaningful in the first place. Number 9. Magic without consequences. Magic in Harry Potter has always been more than just a spectacle. It's a reflection of the wizard's will, their control, and the consequences of their power. Yet in the films, magic often loses this weight. Take the scene in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, where the basilisk's venomous attack creates chaos in the corridor of Hogwarts. The walls are destroyed and the stone is shattered, but everything around them remains miraculously intact. The characters emerge unharmed, and there's no real consequence to the devastation. It's visually striking, but it doesn't make sense. In the book, Rowling gives us a deeper understanding of magic. She writes, "The stone wall cracked under the pressure, but the magic seemed to protect them from the worst of it." The explanation adds weight to the action and makes the magic feel real, like something that can't be wielded without consequences. This lack of explanation in the films makes the magic feel less substantial. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when the Death Eaters attack the burrow, the spells fly in every direction, yet nothing seems to break apart. The characters are at the center of the destruction, but they remain untouched. The magic should have caused collateral damage, but instead it's all show with no substance. In the book, Rowling describes the destruction of the house and the panic of the characters. But it's more than just a flashy scene. Magic isn't just a means to an end, it's part of the world and it leaves its mark. Without these explanations, the magic becomes a hollow effect, robbing the scenes of their depth and realism. Number 10. Perfect heroes. In the films, the heroes often seem too perfect. Take Harry Potter himself, the boy who lived, the one destined to defeat Voldemort. In the movies, Harry comes across as almost infallible. He makes the right decisions, says the right things, and always seems to save the day without any hesitation. But in the books, Harry is far from perfect. He struggles, he doubts, and he makes mistakes. When he faces Voldemort in the final battle, he's not just relying on his bravery or magical prowess. He's grappling with his own fears and uncertainties. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry reflects, "I'm not afraid," but it's clear from the way he feels the weight of every decision that he's afraid of what he must do. The films don't linger on those moments. They give us a hero who seems more certain than he is. Hermione Granger, too, loses some of her depth in the films. In the books, Hermione is brilliant, yes, but she's also often overwhelmed by her emotions and doubts. Her fear of failure, her struggle to balance her intellect with the pressure of the situations around her makes her relatable and human. But in the films, Hermione is a near-perfect character, always quick to solve problems, always sure of herself. There's little time to show the inner turmoil she faces when the weight of the world is on her shoulders. When she uses the Time Turner in The Prisoner of Azkaban, it's not just about saving Buckbeak and Sirius, it's about the burden of time and responsibility. Rowling writes she was going to save him even if it meant breaking the rules, but it made her feel sick. The film, however, focuses on the spectacle, not the emotional cost. Ron Weasley is another example. In the books, Ron is often the comic relief, but he also carries his own burdens. He feels overshadowed by his brothers, by Harry, and by his own sense of inadequacy. His mistakes matter, his insecurities are real. In The Half-Blood Prince, when Ron is torn between his loyalty to Harry and his feelings for Hermione, his internal conflict is palpable. Ron was trying not to think about it, Rowling writes, but he can't help it. In the movie, however, Ron's personal struggles are often glossed over, leaving him as just the humorous sidekick rather than a complex character with his own doubts and growth. Number 11. The logic of spells. In the films, magic often feels like a quick fix, a tool that gets the job done without much effort. The spells are flashy and powerful, but they lose the weight they carry in the books. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, for example, we see Harry wielding magic almost effortlessly. He uses the Expelliarmus charm to disarm Draco Malfoy during their duel in the dueling club, and it's a moment of spectacle. But in the book, the magic is more than just a flash of light. Harry's success with spells is not guaranteed. It requires focus, precision, and sometimes a lot of struggle. J.K. Rowling writes, Harry had to concentrate, had to keep his mind on what he was doing, had to focus on the charm. The effort is what makes the magic significant, not just the result. In the film, magic becomes a tool that heroes use to navigate through danger without much consequence, but in the book, each spell comes with its risks and limitations. Take Petrificus Totalis, the full-body bind curse. In the films, it is used simply as a convenient way to stop someone in their tracks, but in the books, it's clear that casting this curse requires energy and concentration. Harry doesn't cast it carelessly. It's a decision, a calculated risk, and even the smallest mistake can lead to unintended consequences. Rowling carefully explains that magic is not just a mechanical action, but a force that requires control and effort. He had never cast a spell quite like this before, and he wasn't sure if he could make it work. The problem with the films is that they reduce magic to a spectacle. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry and Hermione are running from Death Eaters, they use spells to shield themselves and escape danger. It's thrilling, but the spells are just convenient tools that help them get away. In the book, magic is still awe-inspiring, but it's grounded in logic. Each spell serves a purpose, and the characters use them with careful thought. For example, when Hermione uses the Muffliato charm to drown out the sound of footsteps, it's not just about the spell, it's about the moment of decision. Magic requires thoughtfulness, and even the simplest charm has meaning behind it. The film adaptations often simplify this complexity. The idea that magic in the wizarding world is not just about waving a wand and saying a word is lost. In the books, each spell carries weight. Whether it's casting a defensive charm or a dangerous curse, magic is an extension of the wizard's intentions and efforts. It's not just about creating a cool visual effect, it's about the impact the magic has on the wizard, the situation, and the people around them. As Rowling writes, it was the magic that bound them together, but it was the choices they made that determined how it would shape their lives. The films, by reducing magic to a spectacle, lose that deeper connection between the magic and the character's growth. Number 12. Emotions following the plot. In the films, the emotions of the characters often take a back seat to the plot. We see this especially in moments of profound loss or sorrow. In the book, emotions are not just feelings. They are a core part of the story. Take the death of Sirius Black in The Order of the Phoenix. In the book, Harry's reaction to Sirius's death is drawn out and the grief is overwhelming. The scene is not just a moment of shock, it's an emotional journey. Harry is left in complete disbelief, feeling like he has lost the only true family he had. The weight of this loss lingers, and readers are left to feel Harry's pain with him. In the film, however, this scene is drastically shortened. The shot of Sirius's death is quick, and Harry's emotional response is rushed. The camera doesn't linger on his face, the silence doesn't last long, and before we know it, the moment is over. The depth of Harry's grief, the turmoil inside him, is never fully explored. The pain he feels is simply a fleeting reaction, and the viewer is left with the sense that the emotional weight of Sirius's death doesn't have the same gravity as it does in the book. In J.K. Rowling's novel, Harry doesn't just suffer for a few moments. His mind is consumed by the loss. He wanders the halls of the ministry, grappling with the bitter reality. He had never felt so alone in his life, she writes. Those words hit deep. They capture the profound isolation Harry feels after the death of his godfather. The film, in contrast, skips over these moments of reflection, robbing the audience of the chance to experience Harry's sorrow on a deeper level. We are given the event, but not the emotional aftermath. This is not just a flaw in one scene. It's a pattern that runs throughout the series. The films often rush through emotional moments to keep the pace quick, while the books give space for characters to grieve, reflect, and grow. These moments are what make us care for the characters. Without them, the story loses its emotional resonance. The sorrow Harry feels after Sirius's death isn't just important for the character. It's crucial to the theme of the series, the fight against loss, the need for love, and the power of memory. The films miss that, sacrificing emotional depth for spectacle. Number 13, characters without a backstory. In the Harry Potter films, one of the most prominent challenges is how the medium translates the depth of J.K. Rowling's characters, particularly those who hold significant narrative weight but are relegated to the background. One of the key areas of concern is the portrayal of characters whose internal struggles and complexities are almost entirely stripped away in favor of visual spectacle. This issue is nowhere more evident than in the character of Petunia Dursley, Harry Potter's aunt, who in the films serves as little more than a caricature of a cold, harsh woman. Yet, in the books, Petunia represents a much deeper conflict, one that emphasizes the tensions between the magical and non-magical worlds and the choices people make when confronted by fear and jealousy. Petunia's presence in the films is notable but shallow. She is depicted as a stern aunt who takes in Harry only out of a sense of duty, with little warmth or affection. Her most significant scenes are typically reduced to moments of scolding or disapproval, with the camera often focusing on her harsh features and tight lips, emphasizing her role as the evil relative. On the surface, this portrayal serves the immediate needs of the plot. It's simple, it's direct, and it creates an obvious antagonist figure for Harry to rebel against. However, this simplification misses an essential aspect of Petunia's character, a deep, unresolved fear of the magical world that haunts her every interaction with her nephew. In the books, Petunia's animosity toward Harry goes beyond surface-level bitterness. She resents him not only because he is a constant reminder of her deceased sister Lily's magical life, but also because of her own envy and insecurity. Petunia's jealousy of her sister is grounded in her own feelings of inadequacy. Unlike Lily, who was born with magical abilities, Petunia was ordinary, something she could never accept. Rowling writes that Petunia was the only one of the Dursley family who was quite so affected by the idea that there was magic in the world. This jealousy becomes compounded by a sense of personal failure. Petunia sees magic as something superior, something that her own life could never achieve, and this leads to her bitterness not just toward Harry, but toward her sister's memory as well. This inner turmoil is only subtly touched upon in the films, but it is one of the most poignant aspects of Petunia's character arc in the books. The films, due to time constraints and the need to streamline the story for cinematic purposes, sacrifice the nuance of Petunia's emotions. Her hatred of Harry is reduced to brief moments of yelling or glaring, missing the critical undercurrent of her fear of magic and her struggle to suppress it. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, for example, Petunia's horror at seeing a letter from Hogwarts addressed to Harry is simply dismissed with a shocked reaction, but in the books this moment is steeped in Petunia's terror and dread. Rowling crafts a scene where Petunia immediately assumes that the letter must be an error, perhaps to protect her from the life she knows she cannot control. She fears that the magical world will eventually come for her, dragging her into something she cannot escape. But this rich subtext is absent from the films, which opt for visual cues over deep psychological exploration. This lack of depth in Petunia's portrayal highlights a larger trend in the film adaptations, where spectacle often trumps logic and character development takes a back seat to the more immediate demands of pacing. Petunia is not an isolated case. Many characters in the Harry Potter films suffer from a similar fate. Take, for example, Professor McGonagall, who in the books is a shrewd and compassionate leader with a rich history and a depth of emotional conflict. In the films, her character is reduced to a series of stern looks and commands, often overshadowed by other, more flamboyant characters like Dumbledore or Snape. While McGonagall's role in the films is undeniably important, her inner life, the emotional layers that drive her decisions and relationships, is often left unexplored. This trend extends to many of the secondary characters in the series, who in the books are fully fleshed out with their own histories and motivations. Characters like Neville Longbottom and Ginny Weasley, who play pivotal roles in the final defeat of Voldemort, are often reduced to secondary players in the films, with their personal journey shortened or omitted altogether. In the books, Neville's transformation from a shy, clumsy boy to a brave hero is one of the most rewarding character arcs, but the films give only a glimpse of this transformation. His deep-seated fears and the trauma he experienced growing up under the shadow of his famous parents are barely mentioned. Similarly, Ginny's role as Harry's love interest in the films feels rushed and somewhat superficial compared to the deep emotional connection they share in the books. The problem is not that the films are bad adaptations. On the contrary, they are extremely successful at capturing the grand spectacle and magic of the wizarding world. The issue arises when the complexity of character development is sacrificed for the sake of pacing or visual impact. The Harry Potter books are not just a story about magic, they are a story about the characters' emotional journeys, their internal battles, and how they grow and change. But in the films, these internal struggles are often glossed over or replaced with flashy set pieces and dramatic moments. Number 14. Time for magic. In the world of Harry Potter, time is not just a force that flows inexorably forward, it is a concept that plays a significant role in the way magic works and, more importantly, in the way the characters interact with their fates. The manipulation of time, as seen in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, becomes a crucial tool in the characters' efforts to right the wrongs of the past. However, there is a certain tension between the logical and the spectacular when it comes to time travel. The books offer a clear warning about the dangers of altering time, but the films, particularly in the scene involving the Time Turner, present this concept with a much lighter touch, as though time itself is just another tool in the magician's arsenal. The Time Turner, an object used to travel back in time, is introduced when Hermione Granger is seen using it to attend multiple classes at once. The device is, on the surface, a marvel of magical ingenuity, small, portable, and deceptively simple. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Hermione uses it again, this time to help Harry and herself save Sirius Black and Buckbeak from an unjust fate. The trio goes back in time to prevent a tragedy, and while the events unfold with all the flair and excitement one might expect from a high-stakes adventure, the consequences of their actions are not fully explored on screen. In the book, J.K. Rowling is careful to stress the immense responsibility that comes with manipulating time. When Hermione explains how the Time Turner works, she notes that you're only supposed to go back an hour or two at a time. Any more, and you risk altering things too much. The idea of temporal interference is treated with a certain level of gravity in the text. The characters are aware that what they do could change the future, possibly with catastrophic effects. Yet when the Time Turner is used in the film, the sequence is visually striking, with little attention given to the underlying risks. In the book, Harry, Hermione, and Sirius experience a tense and fragile moment as they prepare to save Buckbeak. The clock ticks relentlessly, reminding the reader that any deviation from the plan could cause irreparable damage. The importance of timing is not merely a matter of convenience, it is a matter of survival. This is reflected when Harry realizes that he must act in a precise, calculated manner, not just for the sake of saving lives, but to avoid the ripples that might be caused by their interference. However, the film, with its rapid pacing and thrilling visual effects, minimizes the careful deliberation that is central to the concept of time manipulation in the book. For all the drama and excitement that the Time Turner scene in the film provides, there is a certain lightness to the way it is presented. The characters rush around, frantically attempting to change fate, but the consequences of their actions are barely felt. The danger of time travel, the possibility of creating paradoxes, of spiraling into an alternate timeline, is glossed over in favor of a more spectacular and visually engaging sequence. The film focuses on the thrill of the chase and the relief of achieving the seemingly impossible but it fails to delve into the underlying themes of responsibility, fate, and the ethical implications of altering time. This disparity between the books and the films becomes especially evident when one considers the broader implications of time travel in the Harry Potter universe. In the books, the consequences of altering time are not confined to the immediate actions of the characters. In fact, as seen in The Goblet of Fire and The Half-Blood Prince, time manipulation has far-reaching effects. In The Goblet of Fire, the Triwizard Tournament and the Dark Lord's return are events that cannot be undone by simple time travel, despite the temptations and possibilities that such a power would offer. The characters come to understand that tampering with time can never fully erase the damage done, and the film's focus on spectacle only obscures this central theme. Another example of this can be found in The Deathly Hallows, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione use a variation of time travel to escape danger or to retrieve key items for their mission. While the trio does not use a time turner in this instance, their manipulations of fate still echo the earlier themes of temporal interference. The magical devices they rely on, the invisibility cloak, the resurrection stone, and the Elder Wand, are all steeped in the consequences of trying to bend fate to one's will. The books emphasize that the pursuit of power over time comes with a price, often a painful one. This lesson is harder to glean from the films, where the consequences of these actions are less visible and often overshadowed by the dazzling displays of magic and action. The spectacle of the films, with their vibrant special effects and quick pace, often takes precedence over the more complex and nuanced exploration of magic's darker side. Time manipulation in the hands of powerful wizards is a fascinating concept, but it is also one fraught with danger. The book's depiction of the time turner and the care that Hermione takes in using it is a reminder that magic is not a toy, but a force that can have profound consequences. In the film, this caution is replaced with the thrill of action, a choice that prioritizes visual spectacle over the deeper philosophical questions raised by time travel. Number 15. The Fight with Voldemort. The battle between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort has long been regarded as the quintessential fight between good and evil in the Harry Potter series. Yet when one compares the books to the films, the true depth of this conflict seems to lose much of its richness and complexity, becoming reduced to mere spectacles of flashy action. The films, designed for visual grandeur, often skip over the intricate strategies, the subtle cunning, and the underlying intellectual and moral battles that define the struggle between Harry and Voldemort in J.K. Rowling's books. One of the most notable differences between the two mediums is how these battles are portrayed. What could have been a profound intellectual clash is instead simplified to breathtaking, if hollow, scenes of wands clashing in mid-air. Take, for instance, the moment in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, when Harry uses a complex charm to conceal his position from Voldemort. In the book, the scene is not merely a physical confrontation between the two, but a tense, calculated battle of minds. Harry, with his deep knowledge of his enemy and the right mix of magical knowledge, outsmarts Voldemort at a critical moment. The spell Harry casts, a deceptive charm to hide his exact location, is described with an air of precision that highlights the importance of thought, planning, and strategy. It's a significant moment because it represents the culmination of everything Harry has learned, not just how to use magic, but how to think through challenges, how to anticipate his opponent's next move. In the film, however, this moment is reduced to a fleeting second. The charm Harry casts, while still there, doesn't carry the same weight as it does in the books. The intense mental duel between Harry and Voldemort, a battle of intellects and inner resolve, is overshadowed by the dramatic visual of the spell being cast. The camera zooms in on Harry's face as the magical world around him seems to crackle with power, but the significance of his intellectual strategy the clever use of magic is hardly explored. The focus shifts from the cleverness of Harry's move to the excitement of seeing magic in action. The difference is especially stark when one compares this moment with the battle at the Department of Mysteries in The Order of the Phoenix. In the book, the entire battle is built on careful planning, the combination of strategy and intelligence to not only survive, but to gain the upper hand over Voldemort's forces. The cunning of the members of the Order and their ability to think ahead are what make the fight against the Death Eaters stand out. Each step is calculated, each spell cast is designed not just for immediate impact, but for long-term advantage. This battle isn't just physical, it's a test of patience, awareness, and understanding of the situation at hand. In contrast, the film adaptation reduces much of this intellectual battle to a grandiose spectacle of flashing lights and fast-paced action. The cinematography takes over, prioritizing visual appeal over the depth of the conflict. The magic becomes less about understanding the mechanics of it, the meaning behind it, and more about creating a thrilling experience for the audience. In the film, the Department of Mysteries battle is a flurry of spells with little time for contemplation on what is actually happening. There is no real intellectual or emotional engagement with the characters' actions, just a rapid series of events designed to entertain. Perhaps the most telling example of this change is the contrast between the intellectual war and the physical one. Harry and Voldemort's final confrontation in the Great Hall during the Battle of Hogwarts is the ultimate test of their long-standing conflict. In the book, the fight is not simply about who can cast the most powerful spell, it is about who understands the truth of their connection, who comprehends the deeper meanings of love, sacrifice, and loyalty. Harry's understanding of these things is what allows him to triumph. He knows Voldemort's weaknesses, understands his desires, and has, throughout the series, learned the importance of self-sacrifice and humility. These are not just abstract concepts, they are crucial elements in defeating the Dark Lord. This intellectual and moral superiority over Voldemort is lost in the film. The final duel between Harry and Voldemort is an epic one in visual terms, but it feels somewhat hollow because it lacks the underlying emotional and intellectual conflict that defines it in the books. The stakes are high, but the audience's understanding of what those stakes mean in the grand scheme of things is limited. The films choose to focus on visual spectacle, and in doing so, they miss out on the more profound thematic message that J.K. Rowling wove throughout the series. That real power lies in the wisdom to understand one's adversary, in the willingness to sacrifice, and in the courage to face the darkest parts of oneself. Number 16. Resurrection and its significance. In the world of Harry Potter, the concept of resurrection plays a pivotal role in the moral fabric of the narrative, a theme that significantly influences the storyline, particularly in Deathly Hallows. The books, especially in the later installments, reveal how resurrection is not merely a fantastical feat of magic, but rather a weighty moral dilemma. The resurrection of characters like Harry Potter himself, and even the symbolic return of figures such as the Phoenix, encapsulate the profound consequences of meddling with life and death. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, resurrection isn't just about bringing the dead back to life. It's about the irreversible costs, the ethical consequences, and the inevitability of death. One of the most poignant examples of resurrection in the series is Harry's own temporary death when he chooses to face Voldemort in the Forbidden Forest. This moment is charged with meaning and foreshadows the ongoing theme in the series. Death is not to be feared, and life is precious precisely because it is finite. Harry's decision to face Voldemort is driven by his understanding that in order to stop the Dark Lord, he must make the ultimate sacrifice, However, the resurrection of Harry is not an easy feat. In the books, when Harry is brought back to life, it's not a dramatic display of magic, but an intimate moment where Harry realizes that his survival is linked to the greater good. This resurrection, though magical, is deeply rooted in sacrifice and choice. The idea that resurrection is not a simple solution to a problem but a decision that holds deeper moral and emotional weight is clear in J.K. Rowling's writing. In this case, the resurrection represents a choice, one that Harry makes knowing fully the cost of what he has to give up. In contrast, the films take a significantly different approach to the concept of resurrection, making it more of a visual spectacle than a deep philosophical exploration. The resurrection stone, an important symbol in Deathly Hallows, is reduced to a magical object that simply allows Harry to see his loved ones again, rather than a powerful, almost dangerous artifact that challenges the very nature of life and death. In the book, when Harry uses the resurrection stone, it's a deeply personal and emotional moment. It's not about bringing people back to life, but rather a reminder of their love and the impact they had on him. The way this moment is portrayed in the film version misses the point of what Rowling is trying to convey. That resurrection isn't a happy reunion, but a bittersweet encounter with what was lost. In the film, the effects of the resurrection stone become more about the visual drama and the emotions of the characters, not the dangerous allure of bringing back the dead. Furthermore, the Phoenix, a symbol of resurrection throughout the series, embodies a similar tension between spectacle and morality. Fawkes, Dumbledore's loyal Phoenix, is the only creature capable of providing Harry with the assistance he needs during his time of greatest peril. When Fawkes sings, it is a haunting reminder that death is not to be feared, but that life, in all its fleeting moments, should be cherished. In the book, Fawkes' song is tied to the emotional and symbolic layers of resurrection, of rebirth after the darkest times, and of finding strength through loss. His presence reminds the reader that the cyclical nature of life and death cannot be ignored, no matter how powerful magic may be. In the films, however, Fawkes' role is reduced to a more symbolic rather than a profound presence. The Phoenix's rebirth, typically linked to themes of transformation, renewal, and the consequences of resurrection, becomes another awe-inspiring image, largely disconnected from the broader narrative about the consequences of playing with life and death. Perhaps the most striking example of this spectacle-driven resurrection in the films comes with Voldemort's own attempt to rise again. In the books, his return to power through the use of the dark arts and the blood of Harry is portrayed as dark, unnatural, and a violation of nature. This moment is a chilling reminder that not all resurrections are created equal, and the price of defying death can be terrifying. The magical ritual that brings Voldemort back to life is fraught with dark consequences, and Harry's knowledge of the dangers of attempting to escape death drives much of the emotional tension throughout the story. In the films, this resurrection scene is filled with explosive action, high-tech special effects, and visual drama overshadowing the deep, chilling implications of Voldemort's return. What was once a meditation on the dangerous allure of immortality is transformed into a spectacular moment, more focused on creating a thrilling cinematic experience than on exploring the philosophical implications of resurrection. Similarly, the resurrection of other characters in the series, such as Cedric Diggory, takes on a different tone in the films compared to the books. In the Goblet of Fire film, Cedric's death is framed within the context of the Triwizard Tournament and is treated with far less emotional gravitas than in the book. The resurrection of Cedric by Voldemort, a twisted mockery of life, is a crucial turning point in the story, highlighting the nature of dark magic and the price of trying to return someone from the dead. In the books, Cedric's resurrection is a grotesque violation, one that foreshadows the moral cost of Voldemort's desire for eternal life. The film version reduces this moment to a mere plot device, a way to elevate Voldemort's power rather than to underscore the dark implications of resurrection. The films, in their drive to create visually engaging experiences, strip much of the complex moral and philosophical debate surrounding resurrection. In the books, resurrection isn't merely about bringing someone back, it's about the impact it has on the living, the dangers it poses to the soul, and the irreversible consequences it carries. The resurrection stone in the books is a symbol of this heavy burden. Its power comes with the realization that the dead cannot truly be brought back. Harry's encounter with the stone reminds him that life is precious precisely because it's finite, and that the past, no matter how much one wishes to revisit it, must be left behind. In the film adaptations, however, the resurrection stone is reduced to just another magical object with no real weight or symbolism attached to it. This shift from a philosophical exploration to a mere magical device reflects a broader trend in the films, a focus on visual spectacle over the deeper emotional resonance of the source material. The spectacle of magic, while undoubtedly one of the series' hallmarks, often comes at the expense of the deeper moral questions that J.K. Rowling embedded into the story. Resurrection, in particular, is one of the most profound themes in the books, tied intricately to the series' overarching narrative about the choices that define a person's life. In the films, however, the spectacle often overshadows the internal conflicts that make resurrection such a potent symbol of both hope and fear. Ultimately, the stark contrast between the portrayal of resurrection in the Harry Potter books and films underscores a key tension in adapting a richly layered literary work into a visual medium. In the books, resurrection is not a simple trick or a convenient plot device. It is a deeply moral question that challenges the characters and the reader to confront the nature of life, death, and the choices that define them. The films, for all their visual grandeur, often sidestep this moral complexity in favor of dramatic flair. What the films gain in spectacle, they lose in the subtlety and depth that made the concept of resurrection so integral to the Harry Potter series. The books leave us with a reminder that resurrection, in all its forms, is not to be taken lightly. The cost is always far greater than what it appears to be. Number 17. Artifacts and their role. In the wizarding world of Harry Potter, magical artifacts are not just mere tools but are imbued with layers of meaning, history, and power. These objects carry a significance far beyond their practical uses, yet in the films, much of this symbolism is lost. The artifacts, which in the books serve as intricate and meaningful components of the plot, are often reduced to flashy instruments for spectacle in the film adaptations. While the films may thrill audiences with their dazzling effects, they gloss over the deeper connections that these magical items hold in the books. One prominent example of this discrepancy appears in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, where the magical artifacts central to the Triwizard Tournament receive little attention in the films, even though they are crucial in the novels. The Triwizard Tournament is a perilous contest that tests not just physical abilities, but also the wizarding world's understanding of magic and their connection to its artifacts. For instance, in the second task, Harry must retrieve something valuable from the depths of the Black Lake. Here, the Triwizard champions are given gillyweed, a magical plant that allows the drinker to grow gills and breathe underwater. In the movie, the scene is quick, with Harry barely having to think about how to use the gillyweed, and it is treated as a mere plot device. The film shows Harry swimming down into the lake, effortlessly overcoming the challenge, with little understanding or explanation of the significance of gillyweed itself. In contrast, J.K. Rowling's book delves deeper into the subtleties of the artifact's role. Gillyweed, a seemingly simple plant, is more than just a quick solution to Harry's underwater challenge. It is tied to the magical ecosystem of the wizarding world. It is a gift from a mermaid demonstrating how magic intertwines with nature in the wizarding world. The importance of gillyweed in the book lies not just in its practical use, but also in its symbolic representation of the intricate relationship between wizards and the creatures of the magical realm. The film's quick portrayal fails to capture this layer of connection and the deeper meaning behind the artifact. Another significant artifact that plays a central role in the Goblet of Fire is the golden egg, which contains the clue to the next task of the tournament. In the movie, the egg is treated simply as an object to be opened, with little attention paid to the way it represents the trials of the tournament and the personal growth of the characters. In the book, however, the golden egg serves as a catalyst for Harry's journey, pushing him to explore not just the mysteries of the tournament, but his own magical abilities and his relationships with others. When Harry opens the egg in the prefect's bathroom and hears the strange screeching sound, it marks a turning point in his understanding of the task and his place in the wizarding world. The film version simplifies this experience, focusing more on the dramatic elements rather than the intellectual and emotional growth that Harry undergoes. One of the most significant examples of the magical artifact's deeper meaning in the books, which is often overlooked in the films, is the use of wands. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we see wands in action during the Triwizard Tournament, but the films focus more on the wand duels and their flashy effects rather than exploring the bond between wizard and wand. In the books, however, wands are portrayed as extensions of the wizard themselves, objects that resonate with the magical identity of their owners. Harry's wand, made from holly and phoenix feather, symbolizes his connection to both the magical and the human world. And throughout the series, his relationship with his wand is carefully developed. The intricate relationship between the wielder and their wand is a powerful thematic element that the films simplify, often using wands only for their spellcasting effects. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, the importance of Harry's wand is emphasized in his first experience at Ollivanders, where he is told that the wand chooses the wizard. The significance of this moment lies not in the wand's practical power, but in the idea that magical strength is deeply connected to personal identity. This concept is reinforced throughout the series as Harry's wand plays a key role in his triumphs and challenges. For example, during the final battle in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry's wand is pivotal in his victory over Voldemort, but the connection between the two, Harry and his wand, is only hinted at in the films. In the books, this relationship is developed over time, adding an emotional depth that is sacrificed in the more visual, action-packed film version. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, another example of the disconnect between the books and films comes with the significance of the Horcruxes. The Horcruxes are magical objects that hold fragments of Voldemort's soul, and their destruction is essential to defeating him. While the films portray them as dark and ominous items, the books take the time to explain the emotional and historical weight behind each one. The ring, for instance, once belonged to Marvolo Gaunt, Voldemort's grandfather, and is imbued with the history of a powerful family cursed by their own dark magic. The ring is more than just an artifact of evil. It is a representation of the twisted legacy that Voldemort is trying to reclaim. In the film, however, the ring is destroyed quickly and without much explanation, reducing its importance to just another obstacle for Harry to overcome. This pattern of simplification continues with the Deathly Hallows, perhaps the most symbolic set of artifacts in the series. The Hallows, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the invisibility cloak are the three most powerful magical objects in existence. In the films, their significance is primarily reduced to their powers. The Elder Wand, for instance, is merely a powerful weapon, and the Resurrection Stone is a tool to bring back loved ones. However, in the books, these objects are deeply entwined with themes of mortality, love, and destiny. The invisibility cloak, which has been passed down through generations of the Potter family, symbolizes the desire for protection and escape from death, while the Resurrection Stone represents the dangers of longing for the past. The Elder Wand, the most dangerous of the Hallows, embodies the corrupting desire for power. These objects are not just magical, they are symbolic representations of the human condition, particularly the fear of death and the lengths to which people will go to avoid it. In the films, however, the Hallows are portrayed more as plot devices to help defeat Voldemort, rather than as complex symbols of human desire and power. The scenes involving the Resurrection Stone in particular are stripped of their emotional weight. In the book, Harry's decision to drop the Resurrection Stone, realizing that it cannot bring back the dead, marks his final acceptance of mortality. This moment, which underscores one of the series' central themes, is lost in the film, where the Resurrection Stone is more of a tool to facilitate the plot than a philosophical object with profound significance. One of the most striking ways in which the magical artifacts are treated in the films is the lack of explanation about their origins and histories. In the books, magical artifacts are often laden with rich backstories, tying them to the broader history of the wizarding world. The Mirror of Erised, for instance, is a powerful artifact that shows the deepest desires of the heart. In the book, we learn about its creation by a wizard named Godelo, whose obsession with the mirror ultimately drove him mad. This history adds depth to the object, turning it from a mere magical tool into a symbol of human longing and the dangers of unchecked desire. In the film, however, the mirror is introduced quickly and its history is never explored, reducing its importance to a fleeting plot element. Finally, there is the issue of how the magical artifacts are used to drive the narrative. In the books, these objects often serve as more than just tools for the characters to use. They are symbolic markers of their internal struggles. For example, the Marauder's map is not just a magical object that shows the layout of Hogwarts. It is a representation of the bond between Harry and his father, as well as the legacy of the Marauders. In the film, however, the map is simply a convenient tool for the characters to find their way around the school, without much reflection on its deeper meaning. Magical artifacts in the Harry Potter series are not just props. They are integral to the development of the characters and the themes of the story. In the books, these objects are imbued with rich histories and symbolism, representing deeper emotional and philosophical truths. In the films, however, they are often reduced to mere plot devices, losing their significance and the layers of meaning that make them so important. The films, while visually spectacular, often miss the point of these artifacts, simplifying them into tools of spectacle rather than symbols of the intricate magical world that J.K. Rowling so carefully crafted. Number 18. Lucius Malfoy, the Forgotten Father. In the realm of Harry Potter, the battle between spectacle and logic often plays out on the grand stage of the movies, where dramatic visuals and rapid pacing take precedence over deeper narrative nuances. A perfect example of this can be found in the portrayal of Lucius Malfoy, whose character in the books is rich with internal conflict, subtle transformation, and profound motivations. However, in the films, he often seems reduced to a mere villainous figure, one who embodies the traditional archetype of a bad guy rather than a deeply conflicted soul struggling with his choices. In J.K. Rowling's books, Lucius Malfoy is a man who feels the weight of his actions, though he often buries his guilt beneath a veneer of arrogance and coldness. His role as a Death Eater is not something he participates in lightly. It's driven by his belief in pure-blood superiority and a desire to secure power for his family, but it also stems from a fear of losing his status and influence in the wizarding world. His actions are not those of a mindless follower, but of someone who is deeply invested in the survival of his bloodline. This is illustrated in the way Lucius manipulates situations to his advantage, often using his influence to manipulate others, such as when he tried to place Tom Riddle's diary in Ginny Weasley's possession in the Chamber of Secrets. This act, while seemingly malicious, is actually a reflection of his desperation to maintain control over his own fate and the fate of his family. But it is Lucius' internal battle, particularly in regard to his son Draco, that truly sets his character apart from mere evildoer status. As the series progresses, Lucius begins to show subtle signs of doubt. By the time we reach the Half-Blood Prince, his role in the war has evolved beyond that of a simple servant to Voldemort. Here, we witness a father torn between his loyalty to the Dark Lord and his love for his son. The pressure on Draco to kill Dumbledore is a pivotal moment for Lucius, as it forces him to confront his own fears and guilt. Lucius, once a man who made decisions without second thoughts, begins to waver. The weight of his son's future begins to haunt him in ways it never did before, and it is in these moments that we see glimpses of a man struggling with the consequences of his past actions. The books give us these complex, haunting insights into Lucius' mind, particularly when he is caught in the grip of indecision. In The Half-Blood Prince, we see him return to Malfoy Manor, visibly shaken, unsure of what to do next. The fear for Draco is evident in his every movement. The Malfoy family, he reflects, is the last bastion of wizarding aristocracy, and Draco's life must be preserved at all costs. Lucius' fear isn't just for his son's life, it's also for his own survival. His internal dialogue reveals his growing anxiety about the Dark Lord's demands. The movie, however, simplifies this internal conflict. Lucius's struggle becomes reduced to mere moments of tension, like a quick glance or a furrowed brow. The complexities of his character are buried beneath the larger narrative of action and spectacle. In contrast, the film version of Lucius is more of a shadowy antagonist, someone who is introduced as part of the sinister Death Eater ranks, but lacks the deep, tortured soul that is explored in the books. His appearances are often limited to dramatic confrontations, such as when he leads the Death Eaters into Hogwarts in the Deathly Hallows Part 1. His role is stripped of the layers of doubt, guilt, and familial love that make him a much more interesting and tragic figure in the books. The film's decision to focus more on action and to reduce Lucius' motivations to simple evil leaves his character somewhat hollow. We see him as a man who is mostly concerned with appearances, someone who is willing to sacrifice his son for the Dark Lord's cause. But we miss the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. This contrast is particularly striking in the scene where Lucius Malfoy is summoned by Voldemort in the Goblet of Fire. In the book, we are privy to his fear and uncertainty as he is forced to confront his master. Lucius is no longer the confident, well-spoken aristocrat we met in the Chamber of Secrets. He is now a man trembling at the thought of Voldemort's wrath. His position as a loyal follower of the Dark Lord is no longer certain. He is a man trapped by his past decisions, and his fate, along with Draco's, is now sealed by forces beyond his control. This moment, however, is fleeting in the movie. The viewer does not get to witness Lucius' internal struggle or his growing fear. Instead, the focus is on the dramatic confrontation between Voldemort and the Triwizard Champions. Another key moment where the difference between the book and film versions of Lucius becomes evident is in the Deathly Hallows. Lucius' character arc takes a darker turn when he is forced to confront his past decisions and their impact on his family. The film does not explore this transformation in depth, reducing Lucius to a passive player in the final battle. In the book, we see Lucius, once the epitome of aristocratic pride and arrogance, now broken and fearful. His fear of Voldemort's wrath and his guilt over Draco's involvement with the Death Eaters lead him to question his loyalties. This conflict culminates in the final moments of the Deathly Hallows, where Lucius must choose between saving his son and maintaining his allegiance to Voldemort. In the film, Lucius' choice is presented almost as an afterthought. He simply appears in the final battle, seemingly with little to no internal conflict. His emotional journey from a proud aristocrat to a broken man is lost in the spectacle of the final showdown. This shift from a deeply complex character to a mere villain in the films is a product of the cinematic medium's focus on action, spectacle, and visual grandeur. In a story that spans 7 books and numerous characters, the filmmakers were often forced to streamline complex narratives in favor of pacing and visual engagement. Lucius Malfoy, unfortunately, suffers from this compression. His character, which was once one of emotional depth and moral ambiguity, is flattened into the role of a secondary antagonist, a character whose motivations are largely unexplored. It is also worth noting that Lucius's evolution in the books is not solely tied to his role in the war. It is also a reflection of his personal growth, or lack thereof. As the series progresses, Lucius is forced to confront the emptiness of his previous life choices. His wealth, status, and influence mean little when faced with the brutal reality of Voldemort's regime. He is no longer a proud, powerful wizard. He is a broken man, crippled by fear and regret. This internal decay is palpable in the books, where Lucius reflects on his past in the quiet moments between battles. These moments are rich with emotional depth, highlighting the true cost of his actions. In the films, however, these moments are left unaddressed, leaving Lucius as little more than a shadow of his book counterpart. The tragedy of Lucius Malfoy lies not in his ultimate defeat, but in the way he is shaped by his choices. His path from an arrogant, power-hungry aristocrat to a broken father is one of the most compelling arcs in the Harry Potter series, but it is an arc that is largely left unexplored in the films. Where the books show us the emotional toll of war, the films provide a much more superficial view. In this sense, the character of Lucius Malfoy serves as a perfect example of how the spectacle of cinema often overshadows the deeper, more meaningful aspects of a story. The internal conflict and transformation of Lucius Malfoy, as depicted in the books, is one of the most poignant elements of the Harry Potter series. It's a reminder that even the most seemingly irredeemable characters can carry the weight of their actions, and that redemption is often more about inner struggle than outward victory. But in the films, this struggle is left behind in favor of flashy battles and dramatic confrontations, leaving us with a version of Lucius who is far less human and far more one-dimensional. In the end, it is this loss of depth that makes the film portrayal of Lucius Malfoy feel hollow compared to the rich complexity of the character in the books. Number 19, Saving Hermione. The world of Harry Potter is defined by many elements: the intricate magic, the relationships between its characters, and the constant struggle between good and evil. Among the most significant bonds in the series is the friendship between Harry, Hermione, and Ron. This trio forms the emotional heart of J.K. Rowling's world, where loyalty and courage prevail despite seemingly insurmountable odds. However, one of the key moments that showcases this friendship, particularly when Harry and Ron work together to rescue Hermione in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows has been adapted in a way that differs greatly between the book and the film. In the book, the rescue of Hermione feels drawn out, almost agonizingly so. Harry and Ron, though incredibly close, find themselves struggling with their choices and the consequences of their actions. They don't just rush into action. Instead, there's a long, emotional period where they wrestle with fear, doubt, and uncertainty. It is a complex moment of both physical and emotional rescue. The situation isn't just about getting to Hermione in time, it's about knowing if they can save her at all and what that might cost them. The movie adaptation, on the other hand, presents a far more streamlined and quick resolution. The scene is almost sudden. There is a sense of immediacy in their actions, which may be effective in maintaining the pace of the film, but it sacrifices much of the tension and emotional depth present in the book. In the film, once Harry and Ron make the decision to rescue Hermione from Malfoy Manor, there is little hesitation. They act swiftly, almost effortlessly, and the scene becomes more about spectacle than about the emotional toll the situation has on them. This change in pacing is not just a minor alteration, but rather an example of how the visual medium of film impacts the way emotions and relationships are conveyed. The book spends considerable time detailing the internal struggles of its characters, allowing the reader to feel the weight of each decision they make. When Harry and Ron finally set off to save Hermione, their journey is filled with doubts and fears. Harry is torn by the prospect of losing her, but even more so by the fear that he might fail her when she needs him most. Ron, too, is not immune to these worries. He shares Harry's fear, yet he also carries a lingering guilt from the earlier part of the story when he had momentarily abandoned his friends in their search for the Horcruxes. The film, by contrast, portrays a much quicker, almost adrenaline-fueled decision to rescue Hermione. There is little time to linger on the emotional struggles. In a sense, the complexity of their feelings is reduced to a few brief moments, and the pace of the movie doesn't allow for the depth that the book provides. The dialogue is quick, the action swift, and the tension that should accompany their perilous journey through the Malfoy Manor is largely overlooked. In the book, when Harry and Ron finally do arrive at Malfoy Manor, their actions are described in more painstaking detail. They don't simply barge in. They first have to navigate their way through layers of deception and danger. They must use their wits and courage to overcome the obstacles in their way, all while constantly worried that time is running out. This struggle, which is felt deeply by the characters, is what makes the eventual rescue so powerful. It's not just about the physical danger they face, it's about the emotional strain and the awareness that their actions might not succeed, that they might not be able to save Hermione. Harry's deep concern for Hermione is clear in the text. He is not just thinking of her as a friend, he is thinking about the bond they share and the guilt he feels for not being able to protect her from the dangers she has faced. He recalls the times when she had helped him and Ron, when she had been the one who always knew what to do. She was their anchor, and now, as they faced the darkness, they had to return that favor, even if it meant risking everything. The emotional weight of the moment is palpable as Harry recalls their friendship and the promise he made to protect Hermione, a promise that had been threatened by the forces of evil. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the theme of loyalty is paramount, and this scene highlights it beautifully. The rescue mission is not just an act of bravery, it's an act of friendship, a testament to the strength of the bonds between these three characters. Yet in the film, all this emotional depth is compressed. When they finally break into Malfoy Manor, it happens so quickly that there is little room to process the immense stakes involved. Harry and Ron don't seem to wrestle with the same kind of internal conflict. They simply react, moving through the action almost as if it's an inevitability. The immediate danger of rescuing Hermione from the clutches of Bellatrix Lestrange and the Death Eaters is still present, but the emotional tension that should accompany such a risky rescue is lost in the haste of the sequence. In contrast to the book's version, there is no time to reflect on the emotional significance of the moment. It becomes a moment of spectacle rather than one of character-driven struggle. Of course, one might argue that the need for pacing in a film adaptation is essential to keep the audience engaged. The length of the books doesn't always translate easily to the structure of a movie, and certain moments, especially those that are more internal and reflective, can be more difficult to capture on screen. However, this particular scene feels like it sacrifices too much. The slow, agonizing tension of their journey and the emotional toll it takes on Harry and Ron could have added an entirely new layer to the film, something that would have complemented the fast-paced action and heightened the stakes of their mission. The decision to simplify the rescue scene reduces the emotional complexity that makes it so powerful in the novel. This alteration, however, also speaks to a broader theme in the Harry Potter films: how visual spectacle often takes precedence over emotional depth. The films, while visually stunning and action-packed, sometimes gloss over the more nuanced moments of the story. It's understandable, given the constraints of time, that certain scenes need to be condensed, but there's something lost in this translation, particularly when it comes to moments that define the relationships between the characters. The rescue of Hermione is one of the most emotional moments of the Deathly Hallows, and it is a testament to the strength of the trio's friendship. By rushing through this scene in the film, the filmmakers miss an opportunity to showcase the emotional depth that has been so central to the series. It's not just about saving Hermione, it's about the bond of trust, loyalty, and love that exists between the three friends. In the book, this bond is explored through the length of the rescue mission, the decisions Harry and Ron make, and the fears they face. The film, by contrast, offers a much more surface-level portrayal that, while thrilling, doesn't quite capture the full emotional weight of the original scene. In the end, the difference between the book and the film adaptation of Hermione's rescue is a clear example of how the two mediums approach storytelling. The book offers space for character growth and emotional development, while the film opts for action and spectacle. Both approaches have their merits, but in this case, the film sacrifices the depth that made the scene in the book so memorable and impactful. The emotional journey that Harry and Ron experience is in many ways what makes their friendship with Hermione so powerful. It's about more than just saving her, it's about proving their loyalty to her and to each other in the face of unimaginable danger. Number 20. Voldemort as a psychological antagonist. In the Harry Potter films, Lord Voldemort is often portrayed as the archetypal villain, powerful, ruthless, and single-minded in his quest for world domination. His appearance, pale, serpent-like, with a snake's nose and red eyes, reinforces the notion of an impersonal evil force. Yet in J.K. Rowling's books, Voldemort's character is far more intricate, embodying a psychologically complex antagonist. He isn't just a figure of dark magic, he is a man twisted by his past, using psychological manipulation and fear to shape his vision of the world. The films, constrained by the need for spectacle and action, often reduce him to a mere embodiment of evil. This simplification misses the psychological depth that makes him such a formidable and tragic character in the books. Through his motivations, relationships, and inner conflicts, Voldemort is a reflection of the profound influence of love, fear, and rejection. From the very beginning, Voldemort's tragic origin story sets him apart from typical villains. Born Tom Riddle, he grew up in a grim orphanage, unaware of his magical heritage and unloved by his mother, who died shortly after giving birth to him. His early years were marked by a profound sense of abandonment and an overwhelming desire for power. As a child, Tom was already manipulating others with ease. He used his magic to control his fellow orphans, to intimidate and dominate them. This manipulation was an early sign of his need to feel superior, his way of compensating for the deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and isolation. Yet, even as a child, he harbored a profound fear of death and a desire for immortality, the beginnings of his obsession with Horcruxes. Voldemort's dark journey began not from a thirst for evil, but from a desperate desire to escape the pains of human existence and to claim a sense of control that was always denied to him. Voldemort's psychology is rooted in his inability to accept love, compassion, and humanity. This is illustrated most poignantly in his rejection of his father, Tom Riddle Sr., and his lack of empathy for others. Love, in the world of Harry Potter, is a powerful force, one that Voldemort is both afraid of and incapable of understanding. He sees love as weakness, something that hinders the pursuit of power. This is reflected in his rejection of his mother's love, which ultimately leaves him unable to form meaningful connections with others. Voldemort's very existence is a rejection of human connection, which is why he is so dangerous. He manipulates his followers, such as Draco Malfoy and Severus Snape, by exploiting their fears and desires. Voldemort's ability to control others is not just through magical might, but through a psychological mastery of their weaknesses. One of the most disturbing aspects of Voldemort's character is his complete lack of empathy and the way he uses fear as a tool of control. His followers, the Death Eaters, are both terrified of him and enamored with his power. Yet despite this fear, Voldemort does not seem to trust them. He constantly keeps them in line through psychological manipulation, using their fear of him to maintain control. For example, when Draco Malfoy's family is put under immense pressure to join Voldemort, Draco is faced with a dilemma that affects his conscience. His desire to protect his family is contrasted with his growing fear of Voldemort. In the end, Draco is manipulated into taking action that is morally questionable, driven by the terror of what Voldemort would do to his family if he failed. Another striking psychological aspect of Voldemort is his inability to accept death, which stems from his fear of mortality. Voldemort's obsession with immortality through the creation of Horcruxes is not just about survival, but about escaping the limits of human life. He sees himself as superior to the common man, and death is a flaw to be avoided at all costs. This obsession is tied to a deep existential anxiety. He fears death because he fears the loss of his own power. The Horcruxes, which serve to anchor his soul to the mortal world, are his way of avoiding the finality of death. However, this process leaves him fractured and less human. Each piece of his soul that is torn away distances him from his humanity, leaving him even more consumed by his desire for power and control. Voldemort's inability to understand the value of human life and the connections people form is seen in his treatment of his followers. He uses them as tools, discarding them when they no longer serve his purpose. This is particularly evident in the way he treats Severus Snape. Despite Snape's loyalty and devotion, Voldemort views him with suspicion, constantly testing him to ensure his loyalty. Snape, however, is one of the few people who fully understands Voldemort's manipulative nature, and this understanding allows him to play both sides. He knows that Voldemort's paranoia and lack of trust in others are his greatest vulnerabilities, and it is through this knowledge that Snape is able to manipulate the Dark Lord to some degree. In the books, Voldemort's relationships with others, particularly with Harry, highlight the deep psychological tension at play. Unlike the films, which focus more on action and spectacle, the books delve into the psychological warfare between Harry and Voldemort. Voldemort's obsession with Harry is not just about power or revenge, but about the deep-seated jealousy and fear that Harry represents. Harry is everything Voldemort is not: loved, connected to others, and capable of self-sacrifice. Voldemort sees Harry as a threat because Harry embodies the very things he cannot understand or control. This is why Voldemort tries to kill Harry, because Harry represents the love and sacrifice Voldemort can never comprehend. The final confrontation between Harry and Voldemort reveals the stark contrast between the two. Harry, despite all the trauma and loss he has faced, remains grounded in love and selflessness, while Voldemort is consumed by fear, manipulation, and a desire for control. In a moment that is not only physical but psychological, Harry's refusal to kill Voldemort, despite having the power to do so, reflects the ultimate triumph of love over fear. Voldemort's death is not just the result of a battle of magic, it is the culmination of his psychological breakdown, as his fear, paranoia, and inability to form meaningful relationships lead to his demise. The films, in their attempt to simplify the conflict, fail to capture the full psychological depth of Voldemort's character. In focusing on action and spectacle, they miss the complex psychological manipulation that is at the heart of his interactions with others. The books, on the other hand, provide a much more nuanced portrait of Voldemort, showing how his fear, jealousy, and hatred fuel his actions. His inability to connect with others, his fear of death, and his desire for power make him a far more dangerous antagonist than the films suggest. Ultimately, Voldemort's psychological journey is one of self-destruction. His refusal to accept love, mortality, and human connection leads to his undoing. Voldemort's role as a psychological antagonist highlights the theme of the battle between love and fear that runs throughout the Harry Potter series. While the films often focus on the spectacle of the conflict, the books reveal the true depth of the struggle. Voldemort, as a character, is not simply an embodiment of evil, he is a tragic figure who is consumed by his own fears and insecurities. His psychological manipulation, his lack of empathy, and his obsession with control all stem from his deep-seated emotional wounds. The tragedy of Voldemort is that he could have been more, but his inability to understand love and human connection ultimately makes him a prisoner of his own fears. Number 21. Lifeless magic. In the Harry Potter films, Lord Voldemort often appears as a straightforward villain, his face an expression of malice and hatred, his intentions clear and unambiguous: power, control, and destruction. His cold, serpentine visage, combined with the ominous aura surrounding him, frames him as the ultimate evil, the dark counterpart to Harry Potter's heroism. However, the films, constrained by their medium, reduce Voldemort to an embodiment of evil, failing to capture the nuanced complexity of his character that is so profoundly explored in J.K. Rowling's books. In the novels, Voldemort is not just a force of evil, but a psychological antagonist whose deep-seated fears, manipulations, and profound loneliness make him far more terrifying than a simple villain could ever be. Voldemort's psychological complexity is rooted in his profound lack of identity and his fear of death. His life is a series of choices made out of fear: fear of weakness, fear of mortality, and fear of being unloved. From a young age, he is acutely aware of his lack of true connections with others. Born to a witch mother and a muggle father, Tom Riddle was abandoned by his father and raised in an orphanage, shaping his belief that love was a weakness, something he could never afford. He comes to see emotions, particularly love, as something that holds people back, something that makes them vulnerable. This belief permeates his actions, fueling his desire for immortality and ultimately power. His quest is not just to dominate, but to rid himself of the constraints he associates with human emotions, particularly love. He manipulates others, such as his followers in the Death Eaters, using their fears and desires to keep them in line, much like a puppet master pulling the strings of his marionettes. One of the most intriguing aspects of Voldemort's character is his profound loneliness, which is never fully realized in the films but is subtly explored in the books. He is unable to form any meaningful relationships with anyone, and this isolation shapes his entire worldview. He is a man who has rejected the very thing that could have given him solace: love. This rejection, however, has only made him more vulnerable, and as the story progresses, we see the repercussions of this choice. His inability to truly understand love, to appreciate its power, makes him fundamentally flawed and ultimately doomed. His obsession with immortality is not just a desire for power, but an escape from the existential fear that haunts him, that one day he will be forgotten, his existence meaningless. Unlike many of the other villains in literature, Voldemort does not seek power for the sake of domination alone. His desire for control is tied to a deep psychological wound, the fear of being forgotten, of being powerless. His manipulation of others is not merely to increase his own strength, but to ensure that he is remembered and feared. Voldemort's quest for power is driven by his desperate need for recognition, for the acknowledgement that he is superior to all. His entire philosophy hinges on the idea that power is the ultimate source of meaning. He believes that if he can control the world, he will escape the inevitability of death and insignificance. In the film adaptations, Voldemort's motivations are stripped down, leaving behind a more archetypal villain, one who is simply obsessed with conquest. His psychological struggles are left unaddressed, and his personal conflict, which defines much of his character in the books, is largely invisible. The films focus on his outward actions, on the terror he inflicts on others, rather than on his internal struggles. For example, his use of fear as a weapon is shown in the films through his terrifying acts of violence, but his underlying fears, the ones that drive his quest for power, are not explored in the same depth. Voldemort's fear of death, in particular, is crucial to understanding his character, yet this is something the films merely hint at, without delving into the psychological implications of his actions. In contrast, the books provide a much deeper examination of Voldemort's character. For instance, when Voldemort tries to kill Harry in the Forbidden Forest, he is not merely motivated by a desire for power, he is also driven by an overwhelming fear of death. His immortality-seeking obsession is a direct response to his dread of mortality. As he gazes upon the mirror of Erised in the first book, it becomes clear that his deepest desire is not to rule the world, but to escape the one thing he fears more than anything else, his own mortality. The mirror shows him surrounded by followers, a reflection of the power he craves, but it is also a reflection of his inner emptiness. His lack of genuine human connection and his inability to understand love make his existence a hollow one, no matter how much power he gains. Voldemort's psychological manipulation is also a critical aspect of his character in the books. He is a master at using people's fears and desires to control them, whether it is through his use of fear to dominate his followers, or through his ability to plant seeds of doubt and distrust in others. His relationship with the Death Eaters is a prime example of this. They are not just loyal because of the fear they have of him, but because he has manipulated them into believing that his goals align with their own. He plays on their insecurities, their desire for power, and their need for validation. He creates an illusion of camaraderie, making them believe they are part of something larger than themselves, while in reality they are nothing more than pawns in his game. This manipulation extends beyond just his followers. Voldemort's use of Harry as a pawn is a perfect example of how he manipulates not only others, but himself as well. He sees Harry as a threat, but he also sees him as a means to an end. By using Harry, he believes he can fulfill his ultimate goal of immortality, of escaping death once and for all. This obsessive desire to control Harry's fate without truly understanding the boy or the power of love is another illustration of how Voldemort's lack of emotional understanding leads to his downfall. In the end, it is this inability to grasp the full meaning of love and sacrifice that causes his ultimate defeat. Harry's willingness to lay down his life to sacrifice himself for the greater good is something Voldemort cannot comprehend, and this is precisely what leads to his defeat. While Voldemort's psychological complexity is more apparent in the books, it is his relationship with Harry that truly highlights his role as a psychological antagonist. Voldemort's obsession with Harry is not just about power, it is about his desire to control something he cannot understand. Harry represents everything Voldemort has rejected: love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Harry's ability to love, despite the horrors he has faced, is something Voldemort cannot fathom. In contrast, Voldemort's inability to love or be loved makes him the ultimate tragic figure. His greatest fear, the fear of death, ultimately leads to his undoing, as it is love, the very thing he has tried to destroy, that triumphs over him in the end. The films, with their focus on spectacle and action, strip away the psychological depth that makes Voldemort such a compelling antagonist in the books. They present him as a force of pure evil, a dark wizard bent on domination, but they do not fully explore the internal struggles that drive him. By focusing on his external actions, the films fail to capture the complexity of his character. Voldemort is not just a villain, he is a man who, driven by fear and insecurity, makes choices that lead to his downfall. It is this internal conflict, more than his outward acts of terror, that makes him such a terrifying and tragic figure. The Voldemort of the books is not just an antagonist, but a representation of the dangers of rejecting love, the consequences of allowing fear to dictate one's actions, and the ultimate futility of trying to escape death. Number 22. Dark Magic and its Consequences. In the Harry Potter series, magic is more than just a tool for the wizarding world. It's a complex system with rules, limitations, and consequences. Magic is not meant to be an omnipotent force. Rather, it is a force that requires careful understanding and control. However, in the films, the way magic is depicted often strips it of these nuances, creating a world where spells seem to function purely for spectacle, losing their inherent logic and complexity. This shift in portrayal leads to what could be called lifeless magic, a magic that serves only to wow the audience, rather than uphold the intricate internal structure that J.K. Rowling carefully crafted in the books. Take, for example, the spell Petrificus Totalis, used multiple times throughout the series. In the books, Petrificus Totalis is a spell that causes complete paralysis, rendering the victim immobile. While powerful, it comes with its own set of constraints. The spell doesn't always work as intended, and even when it does, it doesn't give the caster absolute control. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone Key, when Hermione Granger uses it on Neville Longbottom, there is an implied risk that the spell could be more dangerous than expected. Hermione gave a small, strangled scream and covered her eyes. The difficulty of using magic is underlined in moments like these, where even the best of witches and wizards face uncertainty. In fact, the aftermath of Petrificus Totalis demonstrates that magic is never foolproof, nor is it devoid of unintended consequences. However, in the film adaptation of the same scene, Petrificus Totalis is portrayed as a convenient and flawless tool, one that perfectly immobilizes the victim without hesitation or consequence. This simplification of the spell makes it appear as though magic in the wizarding world can simply solve any problem with no deeper understanding required. In the film, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione use it to stop Neville from revealing their presence in the restricted section, it feels almost like a magical button to push, rather than a carefully considered action with potential fallout. The magic in the film, by this portrayal, becomes something to add visual excitement rather than an extension of the internal rules of the wizarding world. This shift in tone creates a kind of lifeless magic, where spells are no longer bound by rules or consequences, but instead are just another tool in a visual spectacle. The consequences of spellcasting, so vital in the books, are minimized or entirely removed. For example, the magical world in the books often emphasizes that not all magic is safe or effective. The characters, Harry especially, learn the hard way that magic is not just about waving a wand and uttering an incantation. Sometimes spells go wrong, sometimes magic has unintended effects, and sometimes even experienced. Witches and wizards fail to control the magic they wield. In the films, however, magic becomes a shortcut. In a world that demands quick resolutions and dramatic moments, the filmmakers make the decision to let magic stand as an all-encompassing solution. This approach takes away the depth that magic once held in the books, where spells like Expecto Patronum could only be conjured with immense emotional control and concentration. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry's first successful Patronus is a result of sheer willpower and his desire to protect others, symbolizing his internal growth. In the films, however, we see Harry cast the spell with little more than a flick of his wand and a few words. In doing so, the film lessens the emotional and personal cost that comes with this powerful magic, turning it into an easy-to-execute showy spectacle instead of a meaningful act. The spell, Wingardium Leviosa, is another example of how the film adaptations simplify the complexity of magic. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Hermione's first lesson in levitation is a struggle for both her and her classmates. The concept of swish and flick is easy to understand, but the spell itself requires concentration, timing, and a deeper understanding of how magic interacts with the world. In the book, Ron's unsuccessful attempt to levitate his feather, followed by Harry's successful but shaky effort, demonstrates that magic is something to be mastered, something that takes time and effort. There is a tangible sense of growth in these moments as Harry and his friends learn and improve with each spell. In contrast, the film portrays magic as something far easier, a set of impressive stunts that appear effortless. In the movie, Harry levitates the feather almost instantly, making the magic seem like an innate talent rather than something requiring practice and knowledge. This shift contributes to the growing sense of magic as a mere visual tool, devoid of the deeper implications that it holds in the books. In the films, magic becomes increasingly formulaic, a means to an end, with little regard for the effort required to master it. The difference between the book and film versions of magic is even more pronounced when considering the stakes involved in various magical actions. For instance, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry faces the dragon during the Triwizard Tournament. In the book, the challenge is not just about defeating the dragon, but about understanding how to approach the task, recognizing the importance of courage, strategy, and the knowledge Harry has gathered over the years. Harry doesn't merely rely on his wand and his magical prowess. He uses his intellect and the lessons he's learned from previous experiences. The dragon is not an obstacle to be overcome solely with magic. It's a test of everything Harry has become up until that point. The film adaptation, on the other hand, reduces the challenge to little more than a series of fast-paced action sequences. The magic feels like a showy spectacle as Harry uses Accio to summon his broom and then uses a few other spells to outmaneuver the dragon. While the sequence is thrilling visually, the film strips away the layers of meaning and growth that the book conveys. It becomes a straightforward action scene with magic serving as the ultimate crutch rather than an integral part of Harry's journey. By making magic an effortless, all-encompassing solution, the films create a world where magic loses its meaning. It is no longer something to be learned, respected, and understood. Instead, it becomes a visual element, something that exists solely to enhance the spectacle and keep the plot moving forward. As a result, the magic in the films becomes lifeless, a force without consequence, a tool used only for the sake of action rather than as a meaningful part of the story. The relationship between magic and the wizarding world is central to the Harry Potter books. Magic is not simply an external force, but something that requires understanding, skill, and responsibility. This is reflected in the way the characters, especially Harry, come to terms with the consequences of their magical actions. In the films, however, magic loses this depth, often depicted as an easy way out for the characters, devoid of the internal struggle and growth that is so essential in the books. As a result, the films, by sacrificing the logic and rules that govern the magical world, make magic less about the experience of the characters and more about dazzling the audience with visual effects. The magic becomes disconnected from the larger narrative and character development, serving instead as an empty spectacle. The lifeless magic of the films diminishes the heart and soul of the wizarding world, transforming it into nothing more than an impressive illusion. Number 23. Time and its manipulations. In the Harry Potter series, time plays a crucial, almost magical role in the lives of the characters. Time itself is not just a constant force, it becomes an intricate tool, something that can be manipulated, stretched, and even reversed. Yet the consequences of these manipulations are often overlooked, especially in the films. The books, on the other hand, delve deeper into the philosophical implications of time, reminding readers of the dangers that lie in tampering with it. However, when the story moves from page to screen, these deeper themes often lose their edge, reduced to convenient plot devices that serve more as spectacle than as narrative weight. The first significant instance of time manipulation in the series occurs in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. The Time Turner, a device capable of turning back time, is introduced as a tool of immense power. Hermione Granger uses it to attend multiple classes at once, a practical, almost mundane use of a magical object. The device itself is introduced with a sense of caution. Hermione's quick mention of the rule that no one should use it for personal gain gives the Time Turner a sense of forbidden allure, suggesting that the power to alter time is not something to be taken lightly. The Time Turner's potential, however, doesn't become fully realized until later in the book, when Harry and Hermione use it to save Sirius Black and Buckbeak. They are warned about the complexity of their actions, but the narrative seems to suggest that as long as their actions do not alter the course of history, everything will be fine. Yet the events that unfold as they use the Time Turner illustrate that even the most well-intentioned manipulation of time carries consequences. As they move through time, their own past actions shape the future in ways they cannot fully comprehend. They avoid detection from the past versions of themselves and ultimately save lives, but the method lacks any sense of deep reflection or remorse. There is no true moral reckoning for Harry or Hermione. The Time Turner does not appear as a tool with its own ethical implications. It is simply a plot device to rescue their friends, a magical shortcut that allows the characters to bypass any real conflict or challenge. The dangers of manipulating time are evident, but they are not fully explored in the way they might have been in the books. Contrast this with the treatment of time in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, where the narrative becomes darker and more complex. In this book, Harry, Ron, and Hermione must face the difficult task of retrieving and destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes. Along the way, they discover that there is another tool, much more powerful than the Time Turner, the Deathly Hallows. These artifacts, specifically the Resurrection Stone and the Elder Wand, are a manifestation of a different understanding of time. The Resurrection Stone, in particular, offers a twisted glimpse into the past. It can summon the dead, but only as mere shadows of their former selves, unable to truly alter the course of the present or future. This raises an interesting philosophical question. Is it right to manipulate time to relive past moments, even if we know we cannot change them? The characters are aware of the moral weight of these decisions. Harry's use of the Resurrection Stone, for example, does not come with a sense of triumph or relief. Instead, it is bittersweet, laden with regret. The Resurrection Stone in Deathly Hallows embodies the central tension of time manipulation. While time may seem malleable, its consequences are often beyond control. The death of loved ones is an immutable part of life, and Harry's encounter with his parents through the stone does not bring closure or peace. It is a haunting reminder that the past cannot be undone, no matter how much we might wish to change it. The moment is not a cathartic reunion, but a painful reminder of the irreversible passage of time. This, in stark contrast to the Time Turner's more simplistic narrative resolution, shows how time manipulation is not just about bending the rules of magic. It is about accepting the natural flow of life and death and confronting the ultimate limitations of our control over time. In both instances, the use of time manipulation is framed by an external force, the Time Turner in Prisoner of Azkaban and the Resurrection Stone in Deathly Hallows. However, the films largely reduce the complexity of these magical elements, choosing to emphasize their visual spectacle over their ethical implications. In Prisoner of Azkaban, for example, the Time Turner is depicted as a flashy, almost whimsical device that is used with ease, while in Deathly Hallows, the Resurrection Stone's emotional weight is considerably lessened. The films offer viewers a sense of awe, but fail to delve into the deeper philosophical questions that these objects raise. This trend continues in the portrayal of other time-related elements in the films, where the spectacle of magic often overshadows its philosophical underpinnings. In The Goblet of Fire, the Time Turner is not referenced, and the idea of time manipulation is treated more like an afterthought. The Triwizard Tournament, with its deadly tasks and trials, offers a dramatic tension, but the role of time is reduced to simple ticking clocks and countdowns. The manipulation of time is no longer seen as a deeply moral issue, but simply as a way to drive the plot forward. The film's treatment of time manipulation highlights the contrast between spectacle and substance. Time is often used as a mere tool for plot convenience, with little regard for the consequences that such manipulation could have on the characters. The ethical dilemmas surrounding time travel, whether it is right to alter the past, or whether doing so will erase the things we value most, are glossed over in favor of quick resolutions and visual thrills. This transformation from philosophical complexity to visual flair weakens the overall impact of the story, turning what was once a powerful metaphor into a magical gimmick. In contrast, the books remain steadfast in their exploration of the moral implications of time manipulation. Even in the case of the Time Turner, which appears to be a relatively harmless tool at first glance, the narrative warns of its dangers. Hermione's careful use of the device is contrasted with the reckless ways in which others, such as the time-traveling Voldemort in Deathly Hallows, attempt to alter time for their own benefit. the story remains grounded in the idea that time is not to be manipulated lightly, and that the consequences of such manipulation are far-reaching and irreversible. The story of Harry Potter and his friends is ultimately a story of growing up and coming to terms with the limits of their control over the world around them. Time, as much as it is a magical force, is also a force that must be respected. It cannot be bent or broken without significant consequences. The philosophical undercurrents of the books, especially in the way time is presented, serve as an important reminder that we must face the future, no matter how uncertain or difficult it may be. The concept of time in the Harry Potter series, therefore, becomes not just a magical element, but a reflection of the broader themes of growth, loss, and the inevitability of change. While the films focus on the spectacle of time manipulation, the books take the time to show the heavy emotional toll it can have. Time, in the world of Harry Potter, is not just a convenience. It is a complex force that shapes the lives of the characters and, ultimately, their destinies. Number 24. Heroes with predictable development. In the Harry Potter series, the interplay between spectacle and logic serves as a fascinating lens through which the characters and their development can be examined. At the heart of J.K. Rowling's story is a collection of deeply conflicted, complex characters, each grappling with their own personal dilemmas, moral quandaries, and journeys towards self-discovery. In the books, these characters grow and evolve over time, facing not only external threats, but also internal crises that shape who they become. However, in the film adaptations, this evolution often feels reduced and predictable, as the films lean heavily on spectacle and a streamlined narrative, leaving much of the nuance of character development from the books behind. Take, for example, the character of Ron Weasley. In the books, Ron is not merely the comic relief or the sidekick to Harry Potter, although these traits are certainly part of his persona. He is a deeply insecure young man struggling with the expectations of his family, his own self-worth, and the pressure of always being in Harry's shadow. His fear of inadequacy often manifests itself in moments of brashness or cowardice, but these actions are more than just superficial traits. They are a window into his internal struggles. Ron's self-doubt is particularly apparent when he faces the idea of being overshadowed by his brothers or Harry. These fears come to a head in the fourth book, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Ron feels neglected and resentful of Harry's fame after he competes in the Triwizard Tournament. This moment is pivotal for Ron's character, showing his vulnerability and need for validation, but it also demonstrates his growth as he eventually reconciles with Harry, accepting that his worth is not defined by comparison. The films, however, gloss over much of this complexity. In The Sorcerer's Stone, Ron is primarily portrayed as the humorous, slightly awkward friend, constantly trying to lighten the mood with his jokes. While this is true to his character, it strips away the more subtle aspects of his insecurities. By the time the films reach the Goblet of Fire, the depth of Ron's emotional journey is almost entirely overlooked. His jealousy and hurt over Harry's fame are mentioned, but the subsequent growth and reconciliation are rushed, reducing Ron's emotional arc to a single moment of frustration rather than a deeply felt internal journey. Hermione Granger, too, suffers from this simplification in the films. In the books, Hermione is more than just the bookish, rule-abiding character she is often portrayed as in the movies. She is a young woman who is constantly trying to prove herself in a world that often undermines her abilities, not just because of her intellect, but because of her gender and her Muggle-born heritage. Hermione faces a constant battle between conforming to societal expectations and breaking free from them, particularly in a magical society where prejudice against Muggle-borns runs deep. Her friendship with Harry and Ron is integral to her development, as it provides her with the support and validation she so often seeks elsewhere. In Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, for instance, Hermione's decision to take on a heavier course load is not just about academic ambition. It's about trying to measure up to an ideal she has set for herself, an ideal shaped by her own insecurities about being good enough. However, the films largely strip away Hermione's complexities. She is often reduced to a strict, no-nonsense figure, with her character primarily defined by her intelligence and occasionally by her relationship with Ron. While the films do capture some of her assertiveness and courage, particularly in moments like when she punches Draco Malfoy in the Goblet of Fire, much of her internal development and her struggles with identity and belonging are glossed over. The depth of her character is sacrificed in favor of a more surface-level representation that fits the pacing and spectacle-driven nature of the films. In contrast to Ron and Hermione, Harry Potter's own character arc in the films is perhaps the most drastically altered. Harry's growth is central to the books. He begins as a young, naive boy, unaware of his significance in the wizarding world, and matures into a leader willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for the greater good. This transformation is deeply emotional, influenced by his relationships with those around him and the moral choices he must make. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, for example, Harry's internal struggle with the loss of Sirius Black is a powerful moment of grief, guilt, and anger that shapes his later actions. The loss of a mentor and father figure is pivotal to his emotional development, yet the films reduce this trauma to a mere plot point rather than a profound turning point in his personal journey. While Harry's grief and anger are portrayed in the films, the complexity of his emotional state is largely absent. The films focus more on action and spectacle, often glossing over the intricacies of his relationships and inner turmoil. For instance, in The Half-Blood Prince, Harry's intense guilt over Dumbledore's death is a crucial moment in his growth, pushing him to ultimately take on the responsibility of defeating Voldemort. However, in the film, his emotional journey is reduced, and the film emphasizes action sequences rather than his internal development. It is not just the main trio whose development suffers from the transition to film. Many secondary characters, such as Neville Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, and Ginny Weasley, also experience diminished arcs in the films. Neville, for example, undergoes one of the most significant transformations in the books. He starts as a timid, clumsy boy with little confidence and grows into a courageous young man who ultimately plays a key role in defeating Voldemort. In Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Neville's leadership and bravery are essential to the final battle at Hogwarts. The books carefully develop his character, showing his growth in parallel with the main trios. But in the films, Neville's transformation is reduced to a few key moments of bravery that, while impactful, do not fully capture the depth of his arc. Luna Lovegood, too, is portrayed much more superficially in the films. In the books, Luna is an eccentric, imaginative character who provides a sense of comfort and understanding to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Her ability to see the world differently and her refusal to conform to societal expectations make her a unique and poignant character. Yet the films present her as a quirky, somewhat distant figure whose complexity is lost in the pursuit of spectacle. Ginny Weasley, while pivotal in the books, particularly in her romantic relationship with Harry, is often reduced to a secondary character in the films. Her own growth, from a shy, awkward girl in the Chamber of Secrets to a strong, self-assured young woman in the Deathly Hallows, is largely diminished in the films. The subtlety of her emotional development, particularly her maturation into a leader and her role in the final battle, is lost, leaving her character as little more than Harry's love interest in the films. The films, in their pursuit of spectacle, action, and pacing, reduce the complex, multifaceted characters of the Harry Potter books to more predictable, less dynamic figures. The nuances of their internal struggles, moral decisions, and the slow, sometimes painful evolution of their personalities are simplified or omitted in favor of faster-moving plot lines. While this makes for visually engaging cinema, it sacrifices the rich, emotional depth that made the characters of the books so beloved. Ultimately, the films transform the characters into representations of their archetypes, Ron as the funny, insecure friend, Hermione as the clever, strict scholar, Harry as the heroic, suffering protagonist, rather than allowing them the full, unpredictable depth that defined them in the novels. Number 25. Friends and Enemies. In the world of Harry Potter, the relationships between friends and enemies are complex, layered with nuances that speak to the heart of human nature. One of the clearest contrasts in J.K. Rowling's books is the evolving dynamic between Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy. The story delves deep into this relationship, transforming it from a mere rivalry into something more profound, touching on themes of identity, family, and morality. Yet when this intricate conflict is transferred to film, much of its depth and significance gets lost. The distinction between the two mediums, book and film, becomes apparent in how these relationships are portrayed. In the films, the divide between good and evil becomes so stark that characters like Draco are reduced to mere tittle caricatures, devoid of their inner struggles and complexity. From the very beginning, the tension between Harry and Draco feels like the foundation of a classic rivalry. On the surface, it's easy to see why these two would clash. Harry, the famous boy who lived, the hero with a destiny to defeat the Dark Lord, and Draco, the proud heir of the Malfoy family, steeped in the pure-blooded wizarding tradition. Their initial confrontation in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone sets the tone for the entire series, with Draco attempting to secure Harry's allegiance to the Slytherin house, an action that later leads to a bitter enmity. But it's not simply that Draco is the villain of the piece, nor is Harry purely the hero. In the book, the rivalry is rich with deeper layers. Draco is not merely a bully, nor is he simply a bad guy. He's a product of his upbringing, of the powerful influence of his father, Lucius Malfoy, whose own prejudices and deep-seated belief in the superiority of pure-blood wizards cloud his views of the world. In many ways, Draco is a victim of the same dark forces that Harry is fighting. The tension between the two grows as the series progresses, particularly as Draco is placed in situations where he must choose between loyalty to his family and the possibility of redemption. The internal conflict that Draco experiences in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince is one of the most compelling aspects of his character. He is thrust into a dangerous mission by his father, one that forces him to consider the true cost of his family's allegiance to Voldemort. In contrast to his father's cruelty, Draco's hesitation to carry out the tasks placed upon him reveals a young man struggling with morality. He is terrified by the actions demanded of him, yet he feels powerless to disobey. In the books we see his moral quandary, his fear, his doubt, his questioning of the ideology he has been raised with. This is what makes Draco so much more than just an antagonist. He is a young person caught between the pressures of his family and the desire to do what is right. Yet when this conflict is translated into the film adaptation, the layers of Draco's character are stripped away. His internal struggle is almost entirely omitted, making his actions seem more like those of a simple villain, obsessed with his hatred of Harry. The films turn Draco into a more traditional bad guy figure, one who sneers and taunts without much exploration of his inner turmoil. He doesn't seem like a product of his upbringing, nor does he appear to be facing the weight of moral choice. Instead, the film focuses on his outward actions, his rivalry with Harry, his allegiance to Voldemort, and his eventual breakdown in the Deathly Hallows. While the latter scene in the film still carries an emotional weight, it feels less earned. The audience has not been shown the gradual, painful evolution of Draco's character, nor his internal conflict. This reduction of Draco's character to a simple villainous stereotype diminishes the impact of his eventual redemption and weakens his role in the larger narrative. The same stark simplification can be observed in the portrayal of other key characters, particularly Harry's friends. Ron Weasley, for instance, is a beloved character in the books, full of warmth, humour, and loyalty. However, his role is often reduced to comic relief in the films, his moments of bravery and his loyalty to Harry often overshadowed by his role as the sidekick. The films often skip over the more subtle moments of growth that Ron experiences, particularly his struggle with insecurity and his desire to live up to the expectations of his brothers. In the Chamber of Secrets, for example, Ron's bravery in facing the basilisk is pivotal to the success of the mission, yet in the film, the focus is more on the action and spectacle of the scene rather than the personal growth Ron undergoes. Hermione Granger, on the other hand, is portrayed with more complexity in the films, though her character suffers from a different issue. In the books, Hermione's intelligence is a crucial element in solving problems, but she is also shown to be deeply human. Her emotional depth, her vulnerabilities, and her occasional flaws are what make her character so relatable. In the films, however, Hermione often feels a bit too perfect. The moments where her intellectual prowess and emotional growth intersect are often glossed over, and she is at times depicted as a near-perfect figure, lacking the depth that she has in the books. Her friendship with Harry and Ron is rooted in more than just shared adventures. It's an emotional bond that grows out of mutual respect, trust, and care. In the films, however, this friendship occasionally seems more superficial, a consequence of the pacing and the focus on the visual spectacle rather than the inner workings of their relationships. In contrast to these adaptations of Harry's closest friends, the depiction of enemies like Voldemort and his Death Eaters is more straightforward. In the books, Voldemort is a terrifying and complex character, but his complexities are often rooted in his past. His fears, his insecurities, and his drive for power all stem from a childhood marked by neglect and cruelty. In the films, however, Voldemort is presented largely as a shadowy figure whose motivations are less clearly defined. His obsession with immortality and his disdain for those who are lesser than him remains central to his character, but the film does little to explore the psychological aspects of his villainy. His lack of compassion, his inability to love, and his need for control are not explored in the depth they deserve. The film adaptation does a great job of showcasing his power and the terror he instills in others, but it misses the opportunity to delve into his emotional and psychological makeup, which would have made him an even more chilling antagonist. In both the books and films, the battle between good and evil is presented with clarity, but the complexity of the characters involved is not always captured in the same way. The books take time to explore the grey areas between these extremes, where friends and enemies are not so easily distinguished. The rivalry between Harry and Draco is a prime example of this complexity. The books show us that even those who seem to be on opposite sides of a conflict may share more in common than we think. They both come from families with strong beliefs. They both struggle with their identities, and they both face internal conflicts that shape their actions. In the films, however, this nuance is often lost, and the characters become reduced to their roles in the larger conflict, heroes and villains, good and evil, leaving little room for the rich internal dynamics that the books so skillfully explore. The relationship between Harry and Draco also highlights the failure of the films to fully embrace the idea that redemption is a long and complicated process. In the Deathly Hallows, Draco's hesitation to identify Harry to the Death Eaters during the final battle shows that he is not fully aligned with the forces of darkness, but this moment of redemption is not given the weight it deserves in the film. In the book, Harry's understanding of Draco's internal struggle adds depth to the resolution of their rivalry, making their eventual reconciliation, however brief, more meaningful. The films, however, sidestep this complexity, offering a more straightforward conclusion that sacrifices the richness of Draco's character arc. By reducing the complexity of characters like Draco Malfoy and Harry Potter's friends, the films create a narrative that is easier for the audience to follow, but at the cost of the emotional depth and moral ambiguity that define the original books. In doing so, they miss the opportunity to explore the most compelling aspect of J.K. Rowling's world. The idea that people are not simply good or evil, but are shaped by their experiences, their choices, and their capacity for change,